Hey everyone, it's Cassimus Lego, and today I'm very excited to present to you one of my biggest projects I've ever done with the finale of the Harry Potter custom Lego minifigure series, with 16 brand new custom minifigures from the Deathly Hallows. For the last 5 years, I've wanted to end off this series with a bang, so I've got all of the essential characters featured throughout the 8 films. All of them are inspired from the Deathly Hallows Part 2, but many of them have references to scenes spread across the series. I've made some of the Hogwarts' most iconic professors, nearly all of the Weasleys, and obviously the Silver and Golden Trios. We'll also compare remade minifigures to their previous versions to see what changed or what got better. Now before we get started, I would sincerely appreciate if you give this video a like, maybe subscribe to the channel, and follow my social media pages. These minifigures aren't up there just yet, but it's a great place to see individual photos of all of my custom minifigures. The link is in the description, as will be the links of anyone mentioned in this video. Speaking of which, all of these custom minifigures utilize Capemadness fabric. It's about time I was using their stuff. The fabric quality is simply miles better than the stuff that I was using. I just wanted to mention that now so I'm not constantly highlighting the fabric elements throughout this video. Additionally, I picked up a set of custom minifigure wands from Big Kid Bricks. The accessories are perfectly recreated in Lego form. You'll see several of them on these minifigures throughout the segments. I've been working on these custom minifigures for the last 5 months, and I couldn't be more excited to show them off to you. So with all of that said, let's get into the close-ups of each of these custom Lego minifigures. Alright, so I want to start this review by going backwards and taking a look at the Dark Wizards, so here is my second version of Lord Voldemort. This custom minifigure uses a new style compared to the previous version. My new minifigure has lost the small strip of fabric in front of the legs in favor of a new painted waist piece that extends around the entire lower half of the minifigure, and I've removed the trench coat and opted for a dark green mid-cape instead. On top of that, I also trimmed the edges a bit in order to give it a sleeker shape. By far the biggest change to this new version is the color palette. Obviously, I didn't use black for the robes this time around, I decided on dark green. Ralph Fiennes' costume in the film does have that subtle green tint, especially in the behind-the-scenes material, and of course LEGO themselves typically uses dark green on official minifigures, so I decided to go with it too. The skin tone has also changed. I wanted Voldemort to have some color to his pale skin, so I took inspiration from LEGO's Emperor Palpatine minifigure and the way in which his skin tone was represented, and so I went with tan minifigure pieces as opposed to plain white. These changes really helped to give the minifigure some visual flair in my collection, and I'm really fond of how he came out. Although by using a blank LEGO minifigure head did mean that I had to create the expression for Ralph Fiennes' Voldemort completely from scratch. Of course, I had dozens of references to choose from, so this really wasn't too challenging. I also went ahead and painted the decaying textures to the skin and added a light amount of weathering. These just help to more closely tie the minifigure to Voldemort's look in the final film of the series. The torso has a piece of fabric glued on to cover the front and maintain the consistency of the texture as seen on the waist piece. I painted the robe details, and I even modified the waist piece to appear to connect with that painted edge line. And although it's tricky to see this, Voldemort does have a pair of dark bluish-gray minifigure legs to represent the boots that he wears in the film. So overall, this custom minifigure is very simple, perhaps the easiest to make of this entire project. But here comes the fun part. This project is packed to the brim with accessories. Most of these represent multiple years in the Harry Potter series, and Lord Voldemort is no exception, featuring both iterations of his wands. Now let's look at the new and improved version of the first of the Deathly Hallows, the Elder Wand, which is such a step up from my last version. This wand is courtesy of Big Kid Bricks. They have a great selection of custom wand elements based on several characters in the film series, so obviously I picked up as many as I could for this project. This time around, I wanted this accessory to be even more accurate, not to mention detailed according to its on-screen appearance. So I painted a series of brown colors, including using a wash to achieve a subtle fade from the lighter and darker brown sections. Those protruding pieces feature a series of hollowed circles that were each painted on in random patterns. And then I painted the grip details much like before. Additionally, I remade Voldemort's first wand using the base available from Big Kid Bricks and painted all of its bone-like detail. Likewise, this one is so much cleaner. And finally, how could I make this Deathly Hallows project and not make all 7 of Voldemort's Horcruxes? I've spread the custom accessories across this review and paired them with relevant characters. So first, here is Marvolo Gaunt's ring. This one is pretty simple, considering I already had access to a LEGO minifigure ring element. I sculpted the second of the Deathly Hallows, the Resurrection Stone, and painted the iconic symbol itself, and I think it looks pretty appropriate to the LEGO style. I can't wait to show off the remaining 6 Horcruxes, and as a matter of fact, let's take a look at the next one now. And that would be none other than Nagini, the faithful serpent of Lord Voldemort. Now, I knew I had to approach this character very carefully because, on one hand, I really wanted to paint an incredibly detailed snake skin on this LEGO snake element, but I had to fight off that temptation because, for one, I knew I wouldn't have the time to be as meticulous as I would want to be, and I was worried that the detail would clash with the more simplistic style that I adhere to on my minifigures. So in the end, I decided the best way to make Nagini look accurate while maintaining the simplistic style was to paint the various details onto an existing LEGO snake element with the skin printing, and thankfully, I was in luck. This LEGO snake element that debuted in 2021 features a simple brown pattern along the top, so I thought it would be a perfect place to start. I repainted the eyes and painted the ventral scales along the underside of the snake. In fact, this piece has already been used to represent Nagini, and after my custom additions, I think it looks perfect. Moving right along with the Dark Wizards, here is Lucius Malfoy in his Death Eater attire. I've made this character before, but not like this. The detail on this minifigure is slightly overwhelming, which made him the second most difficult minifigure to paint in this project. I really wanted to give Lord Voldemort's troubled serpent the attention he deserves. What made him intimidating for me was the cross-pattern design on the padded areas of the suit, as seen on the torso, waist piece, and of course, the arms. I also used a black trench coat and painted the silver details, and although it's simpler than the film costume, I think it's more than effective. The shoes have some painting as well, which as far as I'm aware are screen accurate. I was very excited to find images of the authentic film costumes exhibited, otherwise I probably would have made up designs on the lower portions of the minifigures. As mentioned, the cross pattern continues onto the torso, and is cut off by the chest armor, and as you can see, the torso features its own intricate painted details. Now this is what I'm talking about. It's stuff like this that became a struggle for me to complete. In fact, there's supposed to be a smaller pattern on the gauntlets, but being a bit intimidated, I decided to omit it and save myself the trouble. I don't think it would have benefited the minifigure all that much, he's already pretty detailed. I also decided to use light nougat hands and paint the black over the wrists, so he can keep the look of his fingerless gloves, and still grip onto accessories. Malfoy carries the surprising honor of being among the only custom minifigures in this project to feature those custom glove tops that I love. Even after so many official LEGO minifigures, I still don't think LEGO has created a convincing likeness to Jason Isaacs as Lucius Malfoy. I knew I needed a head with some kind of scowl, complete with a stubble print, and by the time of year 7, Malfoy is a man clearly fallen from grace. While the head is not perfect, I really do think it captures the appearance of the character pretty well. The head is actually from the recent LEGO Indiana Jones minifigure, with some painted bags underneath the eyes to depict his shabby demeanor. And as for the hair, I decided that LEGO's official hair pieces simply were not gonna cut it either. So I used this custom-made female hairpiece from LeeYylebrick.com and painted the appropriate shade of white blonde hair. I'm actually surprised that it fits so well on the minifigure. My only complaint is that the plastic seam lines are pretty distracting from the mostly smooth molding. Like Lord Voldemort, I made both of his wands, including the disguised cane with the unique snake head. Thanks to the fairly recent minifigure wands that LEGO introduced, I was able to have another crack at making this. Although this time I didn't have to sculpt the snake head and I merely painted it. I also quickly threw together Malfoy's second wand used throughout the Deathly Hallows. It's a standard minifigure wand, but with the addition of some dry brush texture. The next accessory is one that I'm really happy with. It's an alternate head featuring Malfoy's Death Eater mask. I wouldn't have been able to call this minifigure the definitive Death Eater if I didn't make this thing look menacing. All of the details are completely painted onto the sculpted mask, and it was quite the challenge given the size of those designs. The sculpted mask accommodates the hairpiece, but alternatively, I could pair this with a black hood as worn by Malfoy during his ominous entrance at the Department of Mysteries in the Order of the Phoenix. That's it for my new version of Lucius Malfoy as a Death Eater. Although I didn't complete the Malfoy family by making Narcissa, I still enjoy pairing Lucius with my custom LEGO Draco Malfoy minifigure from last year. That or flanking the Dark Lord with 2 of his most loyal Death Eaters. Either makes for a great display. Okay, here is one more remake of a custom minifigure. I promise I'll get to some new characters, but come on, there's no way I could conclude this series without making a new version of the famous Severus Snape. This minifigure is a prime example of how my style has evolved. I saw this minifigure as a less is more opportunity. I kept the black mid-cape as well as the head and hair, but besides that, he's very different from my previous version. I glued some more fabric onto the torso to keep the texture consistent with the waist piece, and then I painted the suit. Snape has some basic black dress shoes, some fabric pockets on the waist piece, and buttons on both the torso and on the black arms. And before I forget, the arms have some painted white cuffs as well. No major changes have been made to either expression on the head. It's still a great likeness to the late Sir Alan Rickman, as is the hairpiece. I did, however, paint a new collar for him, featuring just a hint of the white undershirt. I used Big Kid Bricks' Snape wand in black, which was molded to look just like the wand in the films. Once again, it's very awesome to be using these custom accessories for my final Harry Potter custom minifigures. And I know that was quick, but that's all for the iconic double agent Severus Snape. Despite his simplicity, he's still one of my favorites in this entire project. For the first time, here is the head of Gryffindor House, Professor Minerva McGonagall, as portrayed by the fantastic late Maggie Smith. She's got some black fabric robes and another one of those black mid-capes. This minifigure depicts McGonagall during the Battle of Hogwarts, so she needed a hairpiece. I had a few options to choose from, but I finally settled on the new hairpiece created for the Morgan Elsbeth LEGO minifigure from Star Wars, which has a pretty elaborate bun in the back, similar to the one McGonagall wore during the Deathly Hallows Part 2. I think it looks pretty awesome. I chose the head print from the first modern LEGO McGonagall minifigure when the Harry Potter line relaunched in 2018, as it did not include the glasses. The rest of the minifigure is pretty straightforward. Underneath the fabric robes, I painted a series of dark gray lines and a suggestion of a turtleneck collar for the shirt, and some extra highlights around the edges on the black robes. I learned how important those were for creating depth on black designs. And then finally, the buttons are sculpted and painted in silver. I even painted those thin black strips on each one for extra detail. And just for the sake of it, here's what McGonagall looks like with the awesome witch hat and hair combo piece that LEGO created. I've wanted to use this piece for my own custom Minerva McGonagall for years, and I just love how it looks, especially with the friendly facial expression. This head is perfect to depict the more warm and friendly side of Smith's portrayal as the character. I also made McGonagall's wand. I used a dark brown wand for the base, painted the black portions, and then I sculpted the piece that sticks out at the bottom. A very simple looking accessory that I think represents the wand wonderfully. I'm glad to have finally made my own Professor McGonagall minifigure. Now on to the last of the Hogwarts professors. That would be the head of Ravenclaw House and Charms Master, Professor Phileas Flitwick, played by the famous Warwick Davis. Flitwick's inclusion is a strange one. There are probably some more important characters I could have made for this project, but for whatever reason, I just really wanted to make Flitwick, and that said, he's actually pretty simplistic. I made him fairly quickly without any major hiccups along the way, except maybe the pinstripe painting on the short legs. That was pretty annoying, but I mean, he's got some basic black shoes, a fabric vest, a fabric suit, and then yet another one of those black mid-capes. Although this one is much more unique, as I had to basically reshape the entire bottom half to account for the minifigure's smaller stature. I also cut the fabric in such a way to show the 2 pieces that drape out from the robes, and then I folded them in to allow for the minifigure to still have the ability to stand straight. You can also see that the fabric trench coat was modified to have the folded collars and the tailcoat effect. The vest was painted in light gray. I painted some buttons and a few wrinkles. And then the torso is topped off with some more detail that is just barely visible underneath the fabric bow tie. I've opted for the headpiece from the 2019 Advent Calendar minifigure. I especially like the alternate expression, but both look just like the character, and the hairpiece just seals the deal. Last but not least, I gave Flitwick a dark orange minifigure wand that I then added a black gradient to towards the tip. Kinda generic, but it gets the job done. Here is the first of many Weasleys in this review. Let's start off with the muggle-loving father of the iconic pureblood family, Arthur Weasley. Thanks to LEGO's most recent UCS The Burrow, I was able to capture the essence of he and his wife with these fantastic headprints, and in the case of actor Mark Williams, this is a really great one. I just love the aged look of the expression. To me, it's just full of warmth and kindness. Although if you turn it around, I actually added some scars and some cuts as the minifigure does depict his appearance at the Battle of Hogwarts. He's got the dark green jacket with some pockets on either side, and there's some variation in texture on those. The flaps of the pockets are made with E-tape, which gives it that matte effect against the fabric. And then under that jacket is an entire sweater design painted on another piece of fabric that basically resembles a grid. You may have noticed there is some weathering there in the form of the brown dry brush patches. The collars are painted too. I intended it to appear like the blue shirt overlaps the sweater. Kind of an easy effect. Thankfully, my paint matches LEGO's own dark green color palette, and since his jacket sleeves are so basic anyway, painting the arms would have been unnecessary. Arthur Weasley has those custom glove tops as well. The legs are standard LEGO minifigure legs in dark gray. Once again, no real need to add any extra detail. I like the dark brown shoes with the unique sole detail. Arthur in particular has his soles highlighted in this brighter brown, which really helps it stand out. And that's about it for the minifigure himself. There's a little bit of detail on the back of the fabric jacket, but nothing really to be amazed about. And now's as good as time as any to mention that I used a custom hairpiece also from Lee Brick and painted it in the Weasley signature red hair color. I had a friend express to me that he thought this particular style was too much quiff, and I can see where he's coming from, but personally, I really like it. I think it does have a solid resemblance to the character based on my reference images, and plus, I didn't want to use that same old Mutt Williams hairpiece. I've got that hair element on both of the twins, and I wanted to do something unique for dear old dad, so it's as simple as that for me. Arthur Weasley has the most basic wand accessory so far. I gave him a standard minifigure wand because I really didn't see any details distinct to paint. And that's about it for Arthur Weasley. He's a simple but pretty nice custom LEGO minifigure. I don't have any other major accessories for him, although it is kind of funny to give him a LEGO rubber duck. Next is the matriarch of the Weasley family, Molly Weasley. And just as I mentioned during the previous segment, the use of the UCS Burrows faceprint looks so good. This is by far the best headprint LEGO has made for Julie Walters' portrayal as Mrs. Weasley. And similarly, I added quite the contrast to the aggressive facial expression in the form of some bloodstains. Now on the subject of the top half of the minifigure, I want to point out the hairpiece, which is a nod to LEGO's very first Molly Weasley minifigure from 2010. I think this hairpiece looks a lot more accurate than what LEGO's been using on the recent minifigures. The rest of this custom minifigure turned out very nice. I decided that the medium legs was the best choice to closely match her height. As for the clothing, I really love how it looks. She's got the dark red dress robe, complete with some pockets and that sash piece around the waist. There's even a sculpted tassel around the back of the robes, and the arms also have some 3D pieces around the wrists. In the film, Molly wears a striking dress underneath that robe. Here, I've replicated the design as best as I could. I had some inspiration from LEGO's official minifigure in this outfit, and so with that, I think I did a pretty good job. I'd say it's even more accurate than the official LEGO minifigure. I added a belt made from fabric with a buckle that I modified from one of the links of a miniature chain. There's also some sculpting at the very top of the torso. I made Molly's wand, which to me reminds me of a sponge, but it's supposed to resemble a wood-like texture. Either way, this wand has a big moment in the Deathly Hallows Part 2, so it was important to me that I included it here. And paired with the aggressive expression, Molly turns into the protective mother we all know and love. I'm very happy to have made both of the Weasley parents. They're super unique minifigures in my collection. The beloved twins Fred and George Weasley were minifigures that I was thrilled to make. For the sake of this review, I've decided to show them off together because they're basically identical minifigures with different color schemes. And it also just makes sense that the twins would be shown together. In case you don't know the difference, Fred is in green and George is in purple. Now they both have brown shoes, a khaki turtleneck sweater, and uniquely colored jackets, which if you look closely feature a dotted pattern all around the sides of the minifigure, as well as on the arms. The pattern is just a series of line dots, but even though it would appear to be pretty simple, it was still a very tedious process, especially on the arms. You can see I've also added some 3D fabric elements that help to create some dimension to the jackets. I even extended the khaki color to the necks on the LEGO minifigure heads for that turtleneck effect. The headpieces are really nothing special, although they do a great job capturing that jokester quality of the Phelps twins. And of course, the heads are totally interchangeable, allowing for many display possibilities. And then both minifigures are topped off with that hairpiece I mentioned before. I've got a few accessories for the twins. I made both of the wands, which are surprisingly pretty distinct from one another. George's wand looks straightforward, just some painted wraps around the lower half. Meanwhile, Fred's wand features a lot more sculpting to make up all of the details. I really like these. They both offered a different experience, which was great after what quickly turned into a repetitive week of painting this duo. And I have one more accessory that would be for just George specifically. It's an alternate hairpiece featuring the bandage wraps as a little tip of the hat to the Deathly Hallows Part 1. I actually ended up sanding the front of the hairpiece so that the fabric wraps would fit more smoothly against the hair, and then they're simply glued into the correct positions. It was pretty awesome to make these iconic twins, aside from the patterns on the fabric jackets. Even still, these two were pretty simple, and I'm quite fond of how the color makes this pair stand out. This next minifigure is a freebie. You might even be wondering who this is. In case the hair color didn't already give it away, this is Percy Weasley, and I'm going to explain why I decided to make him and why he's a semi-purist custom minifigure. First of all, I'm really fascinated with Percy's story. His redemption and reunion with his family is one of my favorite moments in the Deathly Hallows book. And second of all, Percy is pretty prominent in the first 3 films, unlike the older Weasley children that we never really saw. Obviously, Bill plays a big role in the Deathly Hallows, so I could have made him instead, but then I'd probably end up wanting to make Fleur Delacour to go along with him, and quite frankly, I really didn't have the time. That's the reason why Percy here is so simple. I was barely able to squeeze him into this project to begin with. That came with some sacrifices, notably the omission of his pinstripe suit, but I'm still pretty satisfied with how this minifigure came out. I tried to blend together the purist philosophy with the other minifigures, so he's got a fabric jacket with some extremely minimal detail on it, and the shoes are painted as well. And I did allude to the pinstripes in the form of the torso print. That's actually the LEGO Bogrod minifigure torso. I thought it would be a good fit for Percy. It's a fantastic print. The aggressive facial expression comes from the recent LEGO Percy Weasley minifigures. It's not easy to get a close look at Chris Rankin in this film, but I swear I saw a stubble on him, so I painted one onto the head, and it really adds a lot to the final minifigure, which, as you can imagine, isn't too much already. I like the hairpiece choice too. Unfortunately, LEGO doesn't make this hairpiece in dark orange, so I've had to paint this one also. That makes 2 of the 7 Weasley custom minifigures in this set that don't share the same hair color. Percy's simplicity carries over to his accessory. I gave him a standard dark tan minifigure wand with no painted detail. Even though he was just shoehorned into this project, I'm still really happy I had the chance to make Percy Weasley. He fills in the Weasley gap, and he bumped up the minifigure count from 15 to 16. For many years, I was always really excited for the Deathly Hallows project because it gave me the opportunity to make both the golden and silver trios. And so first up, it's Ravenclaw's own Loony Luna Lovegood. I had a lot of fun making her in this flowery blue top, and the light purple minifigure legs really make her stand out. I'll say the torso was by far where I spent the most time. I'm really happy with how it turned out, especially each of those colorful embroidered flowers. You can also see that there's a shift of the darker blue beneath those designs. It's subtle but accurate. Perhaps it's easier to notice thanks to all of these dots that I painted around the edges of the darker blue portion. These are definitely my favorite parts of the minifigure. Turning her around, I've basically replicated all of the painted details, which was just as challenging but enjoyable as on the front. One last detail I want to point out is that just as on my other custom female minifigures, I shaved down the sides to represent the feminine physique. The arms are painted to match the blue of the torso. The cuffs are made from fabric and feature a series of dots in a completely random pattern. It was a little tricky to match whatever design is on her film costume, but I think it looks pretty good. Like I mentioned earlier, Luna has these light purple minifigure legs. These legs feature some pretty involved painted black boots. I went with my favorite head that LEGO has made for Ivana Lynch's portrayal of the character in the films. The expression on both sides of her head are perfect for Luna. So now, I want to address the hairpiece. She and Hermione were both really difficult to source accurate hairpieces for. In the Deathly Hallows, Lynch has a very distinct hairstyle. Additionally, I wanted something that would resemble the bangs on the front. After scouring Bricklink, I finally stumbled upon the LEGO Moana sets from this year. And I noticed this hairpiece, which I think is extremely close. It debuted at the absolute perfect time because now I can use it on my own custom minifigure. and it looks great painted in the light tan color. Out of all of the available options for custom wands, Big Kid Bricks has for some reason provided the second of Luna's wands on their website, so I've obviously gone ahead and used it. And besides repainting it my own dark brown, I didn't really modify anything about it. I also gave her the LEGO 2x3 tile print featuring the Quibbler. Since I didn't make Xenophilius Lovegood, this is just a little nod to him. Finally, here is the next Horcrux accessory. It's Ravenclaw's diadem. For a while, I was stumped as to how I would actually make a tiara for a LEGO minifigure. At first, I thought sculpting it would be a good option, but then I eventually settled on a process that was significantly simpler. I painted it directly onto a transparent LEGO minifigure head. Personally, I think it's a pretty clever way to represent this Horcrux, especially compared to how LEGO has decided to portray it. It's pretty cool to make these iconic characters who appear later in the series. Here's another beloved Weasley, and a character who is famously underutilized in the film series. It's Ginny Weasley. Of course, I still wanted to make Bonnie Wright's portrayal of Ginny, regardless of how poorly translated she was from the books. She is a bit on the simpler side, but I still really like how she came out. I was able to get away with using blank LEGO minifigure arms too, so that's a huge plus. The painting on the torso is pretty straightforward, you know, some pockets, buttons, and so forth. I painted the undershirt in chestnut, which I think pairs nicely with the ginger hair. You may have also noticed that, like on Luna, the sides of the torso have been modified with a curve to represent the feminine physique. And the shoes are painted in brown with some extra sole detail painted in khaki. The shaping is a bit more unique in Ginny's case, as there's some extra layering going on. For the head, I decided to use LEGO's print for the Epilogue Ginny minifigure included in the Hogwarts Express Collector's Edition from 2022. Out of all of the head prints LEGO has made, this one is by far the best at depicting Bonnie Wright's likeness. I absolutely adore the squint in her eyes, and the alternate expression is great too. And then the hairpiece is the quintessential Ginny Weasley hair, and therefore no modifications were required. So let's talk about accessories. The wand is nothing special. In fact, it's just a black LEGO minifigure wand with no painting. It looks correct given the wand's appearance in the films though. I've also given Ginny the appropriate Horcrux, Tom Riddle's diary. And this is the one I want to talk about. Even though I'm not a huge fan of LEGO's modern book element, I decided to use it anyway for one reason. I really wanted to use the 1x2 tile print with the writing inside. If I had made the diary any other way, I probably wouldn't have been able to include this really cool detail. I also painted some other details on the cover pieces, including the name of Tom Marvolo Riddle on the back, and the spot in which Harry stabbed it with the basilisk fang. But it doesn't really change the fact that the way that the minifigures grip these pieces is a little bit awkward. It is pretty cool. Now that I've made the diary, I can reunite it with the Teenage Tom Riddle custom minifigure I made a few years back. Alright, so here is Neville Longbottom, who happens to be my favorite character in the Harry Potter series, and I have to say, I was very excited to finally make him, and yet simultaneously overwhelmed. Ever since I became a fan of the series, I knew that painting that cardigan was not going to be fun. Well, I was right about that. This was very challenging, not to mention time-consuming. Despite having a super easy pair of legs, he was definitely the most difficult minifigure for me to make in this project. Both sides of the torso, as well as the arms, are completely painted. And believe it or not, it's actually pretty simplified compared to the film costume. It's missing some patterns here and there, and some of the designs that I painted aren't really in the correct sequence, but it absolutely gets the point across. I'm beyond proud how the entire pattern came out, especially how it wraps around the arms. Also, it's fairly easy to miss, but I wanted to point out that I painted the wrists of the minifigure hands in dark gray. The legs, like I mentioned, were super easy, which was a relief for me. I used dark blue minifigure legs and painted some simple shoes. The official LEGO head print depicting an older Neville Longbottom is a good choice. I was always going to use it. I think both expressions are great for Matthew Lewis. It was also very important to me to have the ability to display the minifigure where a side of his face is covered in blood. This is where LEGO's recent Neville Longbottom minifigure featuring the aggressive expression really came in handy. I thought it would be perfect to use for the alternate head, so I painted the bloodstains onto this one. The hairpiece is obvious in the dark brown color and can easily fit onto the alternate expression. Now that Neville's appropriately heroic, it's time to show off the new and improved Sword of Godric Gryffindor. I said it way back when I made the Chamber of Secrets minifigures, but LEGO's official piece is beautifully recreated in LEGO minifigure accessory form. I kept it mostly the same, but to make this one really special, I painted the lettering on the blade itself. Although I couldn't fit Godric Gryffindor in its entirety, I didn't think there was really enough space for legible painted text. Lastly, I applied some weathering to the blade. This famous sword is all around a fantastic upgrade. I also made Neville's own unique wand from a black LEGO minifigure wand with a dark brown wash. It's really cool for me to see this custom minifigure in front of me after all these years. It's finally time for the Golden Trio, and I must say, it was so exciting to make the adult versions of these iconic characters, and Hermione Granger here is no exception. Of course, she's wearing that denim jacket paired with the pink hoodie. It just makes for a wonderful contrast. You'll notice right away that I painted the fabric jacket this really nice light blue color, and then I added the dark blue as a secondary for all the seam lines, pockets, and so forth. Again, I think it really pops. I think the arms help in this regard too, as I put some cuffs on them, and then that dark blue lining continues around them also really nicely. The back has some more outlines, as well as the back of the hood, although currently obscured by the braid. This was actually one of the very first torsos that I painted for the entire project, and right away I was excited for the rest of the minifigures because I was so pleased with how the paintwork on the torso turned out. I want to highlight a few things, including the zipper and the bag strap, both of which are 3D elements made from E-tape. While the strap is just black, the zipper actually has some tiny details painted onto them. Hermione has brown shoes. I really like the layering I achieved here, similar to the majority of the painted shoes on these custom minifigures. Towards the top of the right leg, I sculpted Hermione's beaded handbag. I glued it directly to the leg, so unfortunately it's not coming off, so I wouldn't quite call it an accessory. I'm glad I have it represented on the minifigure regardless, as it plays a massive role in the Deathly Hallows. I used LEGO's older Hermione Granger headprint. I see nothing wrong with either of the expressions or their resemblance to Emma Watson. Additionally, I painted some small bloodstains on the aggressive expression. And now I want to discuss what was by far the most challenging part of this minifigure. It wasn't to do with the painting, it was selecting the hairpiece. I finally settled on the LEGO Friends mini doll hairpiece that you see in front of you, painted brown. And before I found this one, I wasn't sure what I could use that would be appropriate. The front may not be perfect, but there's the braid on the back, which is why I really wanted to use this piece. I think it's perfect for Hermione's hairstyle during the Battle of Hogwarts. As a matter of fact, LEGO used this hairpiece in bright light yellow on the LEGO Luna Lovegood minifigure included with the Malfoy Manor from earlier this year. I think it's much better served on Hermione. Throughout the Deathly Hallows Part 2, Hermione carries Bellatrix Lestrange's wand. This is another huge upgrade from my previous version, thanks to Big Kid Bricks. This time around, I've painted the wand in the accurate dark brown color, and then I added a light brown wash on top of that to add some weathering, once again aiming for a wooden texture. I also paired Hermione with the Hufflepuff Cup Horcrux. Its construction is pretty significant, and I built up the cup using a LEGO minifigure ring element from The Lord of the Rings, and then a fez element flipped upside down. I sculpted the handles to complete the look of the chalice, meanwhile the base is made from a pearl gold stud that I cut in half. I even did my best to paint the Hufflepuff badger on the front. You can be the judge of how successful I was. Finally, I weathered the entire thing. With that said, that's it for the brilliant young witch Hermione Granger, all grown up. We're almost through these custom minifigures, but before we wrap this thing up in a nice little bow, let's take a look at the adult Ron Weasley, the most famous of the entire Weasley family. Personally, I was also intimidated when I got started on him, and that's just because painting a plaid design is always a tedious chore. It's such a time-consuming process. The pattern on the arms and the jacket took me a few days to get through, but thankfully it came out very smooth, way better than I thought actually. I'm also really happy with the style of the fabric jacket. I glued some black fabric on the interior of the jacket to peek out around the sides, and that creates a very satisfying sense of depth for me. The fabric even has a clean fold around the edges, and that's where I ended up gluing some drawstring details. But anyway, the plaid pattern itself started off with a coat of dark brown, and then I painted all of those gray lines and the overlapping red sections. I tried to keep the design as accurate to the film costume as I could, down to the gaps between the red sections. And then on the back there's a 3D hood with that pattern continued onto it. I'm very glad the jacket turned out as good as it does, because I wasn't sure I could pull it off. Before I forget, the wrists are painted as well, just as I had done on the Weasley twins, as well as on several other minifigures in this review. Underneath, I painted the red striped shirt. I actually made a conscious decision not to weather this area of the minifigure, despite every form of reference I had demonstrating significant wear on the shirt. I did try it out, but it just looked way too muddy, and it really wasn't how I wanted Ron to look. I think the striped shirt looks better when the stripes are clearly defined anyway. The legs also have no weathering, but the shoes are painted in brown with some darker sole details. So on the head, you've probably noticed Ron's scruffiness. Now in the film, Rupert Grint appears to be clean-shaven, albeit covered in grime. But I don't know, I think he looks better with some scruff here and there. So I painted just a few hairs on both sides of the head, as well as the little mole on the left side. For the head itself, I decided to use the Ron Weasley minifigure from the LEGO Collectible Minifigure Series 2. I was never fond of the sheepish-looking expression LEGO has used on every single one of their older Ron minifigures. This one is much more appropriate for the Deathly Hallows, and even the alternate expression is alright too. Fun fact, the minifigure this head was featured on was one of the very first LEGO Harry Potter minifigures I bought. It's been with me for a long time, and I never thought I'd be using it for my own custom Ron Weasley minifigure all these years later. Meanwhile, the hairpiece is spot on to Grint's hairstyle post-Goblet of Fire. Before I move on to the final minifigure, let me get through Ron's accessories, and hold tight because I've got a few to show off. First is the wand. Ron is armed with Peter Pettigrew's wand, which he used throughout the Deathly Hallows Part 2. I wasn't making the unique wands back when I made Pettigrew, so I never attempted this one until now. I used the base of a black minifigure wand, and then I sculpted the waviness of the core body, and then I glued on a loop on the bottom to recreate the hilt. Besides all of the custom wands from Big Kid Bricks, this one is by far the most complex of the wands I made myself. Next is Dumbledore's Deluminator. To be honest, I didn't expect this to look this good. I think it has to do with the base that I started with. It was a dark green bar piece with a stud on the end of it. Well, I cut that stud off, and it left me with this hollowed out section that I thought would look perfect for the light inside. So I sculpted that oval as well as the lid in the open position, and then I extended the bottom with another minifigure wand that I cut up. Lastly, I made the ignition switch 3D, even though it should be oriented on the opposite side of the accessory. And like I said, I just really love how this thing turned out. Alright, last one. How could I leave out Slytherin's locket? This is the only Horcrux that isn't LEGO whatsoever. I sculpted the locket shape because I couldn't think of what LEGO element would best resemble it. That sculpted piece was painted up with the S, and then I glued the entire piece to a miniature chain. I took inspiration for this accessory from my Lord of the Rings custom LEGO minifigure series in the way that I put the ring on a chain so my Frodo minifigure could dangle it, or put it around their neck. And I did the same thing here with the locket, and the execution is even cleaner this time around. Minifigures can hold it from the chain, or it can be worn around the neck. Once again, I am in love with this idea. It's very cool, despite being a bit oversized. Alright, I know I've been talking about this guy for a while, but with the accessories covered, that's everything for the adult Ron Weasley. It was great to finally make new versions of he and Hermione, and now we can end off this review with the final minifigure. I can't think of a better way to conclude this custom minifigure series, my longest running series ever in fact, than with the adult Harry Potter, Horcrux and all. I was inevitably going to make Harry in this outfit someday, and I'm really thrilled to have finally made it. And though my style has changed over the years, I think this minifigure struck a fantastic balance between simplicity and accurate detail. Take the fabric jacket for instance. Besides the edge outlines and a few sets of brown lines, there isn't all too much going on, but it still looks very satisfying. I'm particularly happy with the 3D pockets. Underneath the jacket is an entirely painted torso depicting the dark blue sweater over the gray t-shirt seen in many of the films. There's even a 3D zipper similar to Hermione. Another detail that I included on the jacket are some tears. You can see one just below the left pocket, as well as two more on the arms. The tears are accurate to the film costume, but I didn't want them to be super noticeable, so I only painted 3 and I spread them out to avoid being too overwhelming. The arms are capped with some 3D cuffs, complete with some painted golden fasteners. And here's a quick look at the back where you can see the painted lines continue around the entire minifigure like usual. Now Harry is a special case because, like Voldemort, he's one of the only minifigures in this project to feature some weathering. I don't know why, but out of all of the other characters, I just felt like it was appropriate to weather Harry's dark blue legs to depict the significant dirt on his jeans. Despite my general hesitation to adding weathering to my custom minifigures, I think this came out alright, obviously not something that I'll do often. Harry's got some black shoes with gray soles as well. This is probably the last time I'll say this, but I painted the eyebrows dark brown on both expressions of the head to bring them closer to Daniel Radcliffe's appearance in the films. I didn't really weather the headpiece at all, but don't worry, I made an alternate expression inspired by the famous film poster, featuring significantly more weathering and some bloodstains. The last of the custom Big Kid Bricks minifigure accessories in this review is Draco Malfoy's wand, now in allegiance to Harry following the events of the Deathly Hallows Part 1. These custom wands have been immensely helpful for this project. All I did was paint the body dark brown, but I mean, that was all that was necessary. These capture the essence of the film props perfectly. We've seen several custom LEGO minifigures and several accessories to go along with them, but how's one more? Of course, I should probably include the final relic of the Deathly Hallows themselves, the Cloak of Invisibility, and as you can see, it does a wonderful job at hiding Harry Potter here. Alright, obvious joke is obvious. In all seriousness, I really do love LEGO's invisibility cloak. Check out the intricate printing around this piece, it's so cool. With the Wizarding World's chosen one out of the way, we finally made it to the end of one of my largest projects ever, and the entirety of my Harry Potter custom LEGO minifigure series. If you stuck around for the whole thing, I sincerely appreciate it, thank you very much. This was a lot of work that, as I said, was spread across these last 5 months. It's kind of bittersweet. I've been anticipating the finale of the series for a long time. I really hope you've enjoyed this project and everything I was able to present to you. Don't go away just yet. I've still got to formally conclude this custom LEGO minifigure review video. Well, that's it. Another series of custom LEGO minifigures has come to its end. 5 years in the making. Once again, thank you very much if you stuck around for this entire thing. Obviously, it meant a lot for me to go out on a high note with 16 custom minifigures, one of my largest sets to date. Even though some of them weren't all too complicated, it was still a massive challenge to complete this with everything else going on in my personal life. And hey, if you want to check out the previous review videos in this project, there's a link to the complete Harry Potter custom LEGO minifigure series playlist down in the description, as well as the links to my social media platforms where I'll be uploading these minifigures early next year. Seriously everyone, thank you so much for supporting me through this series. It's been an honor. But with that, have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and I'll see you next time.